We keep using the arena metaphor a lot, and for good reason. You can use the arena to be a gladiatorial experience where we're going to be coming at each other. One of us has to win. That is the only way that someone leaves this arena. There has to be a winner, and therefore there has to be a loser and a casualty in this. Someone has to give up something fundamental to them. Or that arena becomes something which is a shared space for exploration and learning and knowing when to step forward, when to step back, when to do that together, when to give the other the space to do that.
That was Shoshana Bloom discussing the song It's About What You Do, which Liz Hanlon and I wrote after being inspired by Psalm 82. I'm Shep Rosenman. This is The Rest is Commentary, where we discuss what songs inspired by the Psalms or Tehillim inspired my guests. Shosh is a certified coach and clinical hypnotherapist based in London, working with clients across 5 continents, 6 if you count the amazing clients who ran a marathon in Antarctica. She's obsessed with 90s shows, especially Buffy. Shosh describes herself as an introvert who loves people. She loves superhero stories and helping everyone find and own their superpowers so they can keep doing what matters without burning out. She was always inspired by her favorite real-life superhero, Mr. Rogers. Shosh is a dear friend. She and I worked closely together on the Limud movement when she was running the global board for Limud. We discuss different approaches to leadership, how the term leadership is overused and can be off-putting, the downsides of being a perfectionist, the symbiosis between a performer and their audience, the symbiosis between individuals in leadership roles with their constituents, the importance of shared language and stories, and so much more. Let's start off by listening to It's About What You Do.
On the door of the disenchantment clinic, when you've done all that you can and think, now it's not up to man, but up to Hercules and Xena. Get back in the your face with dust and blood and sweat and grace. Fire up your soul in the cold light of day. It's about what you do, not about what you say. It's about what you do, not about what you say. Take a shine to those snark patrol militias, gunning down the earnest, 'cause they like to be capricious. When you've done all that you can and think, now it's not up to man, but up to Hercules and Xena. Get back in the arena and mar your face with dust and blood and sweat and grace. Fire up your soul in the cold light of day. It's about what you do, not about what you say. It's about what you do, not about what you say. You're running out of road. Let your dagger intrigue. Pull away the veil. Get the hell out of the Bush League. When you've done all that you can and think, now it's not up to me, but up to Hercules and Xena. Get back in the arena and mar your face with dust and blood and sweat and grace. Fire up your soul in the cold light day. It's about what you do, not about what you say. It's about what you do, not about what you say. Fire up your soul in the cold light day. It's about what you do, not about what you say.
Hi, Shosh. It's so good to see you.
It's good to see you too.
I love that smile. I remember that smile from the first time we met, the Hilton in Costa Mesa. You were with Kevin, and you were just so excited to be in Los Angeles. It made me like, I said, okay, I want to spend the rest of the weekend with Shosh and Kevin.
Well, I mean, fun story with that was that our actual plan was to leave LA straight after the event because we were like, oh, what do we want to stay in LA for? Like, this is the whole of California. But on the strength of meeting you and a few other people who are all now very dear friends, we were like, no, we're going to stay for longer. And we just, the best time. So thank you.
Yes, for sure. I love that we are still in touch all these years. That brings us back to, 2008? Long time. That was the first Limud LA. Here's what we're doing today. I'm going to ask you one question. It goes like this. I've offered you a gift. Gifts are things that sometimes we put in the back of the closet, and sometimes we put on the front shelf, and sometimes we put it on the front shelf when a guest comes visiting, and the rest of the time we keep it tucked away in a drawer. And sometimes it's something that, it's a great King Crimson song about this. The more I looked at it, the more I liked it. Sometimes you play with it over and over again when you get a gift. The gift I've given you is neutral. While I want you to like it, you can put it in the shelf, you can give it away, re-gift it. What I want to know, now that you've been given this gift of this song, it's about what you do, which is based on Psalm 82. What curiosities, questions, love, loathing, hope, hatred did it inspire in you? Anything else too?
So I wish that was an easy question to answer. I think actually my relationship with the song is pretty complicated. The first time we talked about this, I held the song at arm's distance. And that was because I was terrified of doing a podcast. I was terrified of the conversation. So I was just like, I'm listening to the song, but I'm not really listening to the song because the song is going to mean action. And I didn't appreciate the irony of that. Until I, would lean in and re-listen to the song. And actually listening to the song again yesterday, suddenly it hit me in a completely different way from every other time that I'd listened to it. And it was just like, oh, wow. So like, in terms of what am I doing with the gift? Like, where is it? It became a gift that I was just like, I can't quite face it, to actually something that I'm carrying around with me rather than putting it somewhere static. It's been a gift that shifts depending on the light that I'm holding in it and where I am at the time.
Wow. When Sherry got me a membership to some gym, however long ago it was, I was like, yeah, I should work out. For me, there's an arc to exercise in my life. When I was a young person, I played basketball and baseball and tennis. Like I was soccer, whatever sport there was, I was interested in playing it. Then when Sherry and I got married, I was continuing to play a lot of basketball. First, I was playing in, I think it was called the Elite Sur League. My friends and I called it the Alter Cocker League because it was not young people. This wasn't teenagers. So when I started, I played in the A-League, and it was competitive, and, 1 year we won, 1 year we didn't, whatever. Then we kept losing year after year, and my teammates and I got frustrated with that and said, well, let's try the B-League. I started getting injured in the B-League, but we were winning. And after a while, and the reason I got injured, it's like when you play trained ball, you use your body differently than when you never were coached. You know, the people who had not been coached, they'd go up for a rebound in a particular way, not aware of their surroundings. And, you know, I would come down and I'd get injured, or I would have an elbow crack me on the top of the head. And one week, Sherry said, "That's it, you're retiring. Every week you come back with an injury of some sort." And they were mostly injuries that, you know, okay, you get past it and you play again the next week. But there was starting to be 2 and 3 weeks in between these injuries and when I could play again. So, you know, after she said that enough, probably a whole other season, I finally said, okay, you're right. It's just not good. We have little kids. I need to kind of be available to them. If I'm hobbling around, I can't help with the kids. It's hard for me to get to and from work. It's like, it's just too much. So I stopped being interested in sports, no interest in working out. You know, I'd been a runner. I'd been a swimmer. So like, I just stopped all of it. And for years, Sherry was like, okay, you have a family history of heart disease. You need to be working out. Back to the point, she gave me membership to a club. And, you know, I went once, twice. Like, I wasn't really into it. By the way, because Sherry is as tenacious as she is, she got for herself an elliptical and wanted me to use the elliptical. And I had, you know, I found every excuse in the world not to, because I found that kind of exercise boring. So she got me a subscription to Netflix. You don't have to engage your brain with the exercise, just watch something. But if she gave me one of those things today, when I've had a renaissance with athletic activity after being converted back to it through Orange Theory Fitness and now Peloton as well and other things, like now I would love it. I would hafochba. I would turn it over and over again because it's something I was open to. So it sounds like you had some of that, and you know, you very quickly blew over your resistance to it, which was that you had some fear around doing a podcast. Are you comfortable talking about what that fear is about?
I don't like to be photographed. I don't like to be videoed. I don't like to be recorded. And I'm not saying it like there are so many times when people want to photograph or video or record it. So it's not in terms of the response to the demand. There is something about the permanence of those things where when you can have that sort of anxiety after a conversation, we're like, did I say that? Did I actually say that? And then when it's recorded, it moves on. But I think it's one of those things where, as we all so often do, we start telling ourselves a story. And that particular story is, I don't do things where I get recorded. I don't. So then I don't do that. And then I put off any amazing opportunities that would give me the space to experiment and have fun with it and not take something so seriously. All the things that I'm very comfortable inviting other people to do that will run a mile from when it comes to me. So when you first gave me that gift, it was like when you get a gift that you have to reciprocate and you're like, oh, now I've been given this great thing. How am I going to possibly find? And knowing that actually the thing that's reciprocal is just being in a conversation with you, which is crazy because I love being in conversations with you.
We have had so many conversations leading up to this one that I wish we had recorded.
It's a ridiculous thing. It's fascinating for me. And then having not made the connection with, you know, the lyrics and the essence of the song about you need to get into the arena. Like, you kind of just have to do it sometimes.
Yeah. It's the Nike commercial. Just do it.
Brene Brown talks about it, that, you know, don't criticize the person in the arena if you're not willing to get into that arena yourself. Like, it's the person that's being brave and taking chances. And how many times does that happen where it turns out to be something really wonderful and really amazing? So like, I found myself being simultaneously the person who was criticizing almost this imaginary avatar of myself in the arena.
What's that about? You experience yourself the way you experience yourself. Obviously, I experience you as I experience you. So I only know you to be smart, charming, funny, incredibly knowledgeable about a wide array of topics, humble when you don't. Like, you're like the perfect conversation partner. You're the perfect kind of leadership facilitator in that way. You listen to contrary opinions and give them weight before deciding what to do with it. These are learned skills, which perhaps they're natural to you. Perhaps they're acquired through your professional work. Perhaps they're acquired by you through your lay leadership roles. And it could be your prior professional work, or it could be your new, like there's any number of ways that you've acquired this basket of skills and leanings. But there's something there that says to you that you're not that, or that you want to be something else that prevents you from being photographed, recorded, et cetera, et cetera. Are you comfortable sharing what that might be? Because I think it's something we have in common.
I don't know that I know what the answer is, other than I think for a long time, I felt the way in which one can have an impact is by being frontline. So leading from the front, being the visible vocal person. And I did that for a while. And I think I was never truly comfortable with it. I could do it in the moment. And then after that, I'd come home and I'd have this complete crisis of confidence over it. Being in that position was something that I always liked to do and also hated afterwards, which is, I think, one of the reasons why I completely pivoted. And I was like, no, you know what? Doing things from behind the scenes, it's a much more comfortable space. But I think I live in fear of saying or doing the wrong thing. I think if we're going to go deep with it, I've always had a sense of, what if I'm not smart enough? What if I'm this enough? And there are lots of parts of that where I think I've made peace with it. But there was something about the permanence of a recording or a photograph where you can critically examine that afterwards, possibly with the emphasis on critically, where I would just take apart every single piece and would just be like, I can't believe that. I can't believe that's what I should have said this. I should have said that. I should have, all of those kind of things. And that's exhausting.
Yeah. Sure. Well, I think it ties in with what you were saying about being at odds with yourself by being a traditional leader from the front versus, I'm going to use your language, so I want to come back to that, being a behind the scenes leader. You're at odds because you're not comfortable necessarily telling people what to do. You're not comfortable being the focus of when many people are involved. Any of those is a valid reason not to be a leader from the front. Being a leader from behind the scenes, I liken this to me, and this is so connected to where I am right now. I've been a musician since I was 16, and sure, I love being in my room, this studio, the one in LA, even my room back in Far Rockaway or any of the other places I've lived in. I love being in my room, just playing, right? The sense of play and wonder, oh my God, if I put these two notes together, or, if I space them out this way and I add a delay, like just all that sense of wonder that comes with that is very moving to me. And Dayenu, it's enough. But we're in this conversation because when I retired from Limud, which is how we met, I decided that I was not going to take a community leadership position because I had been doing it at that point from 1998 to 2021. So it's like 23 years with one year break, but it was a very intense work year. So I didn't get any kind of sabbatical benefit from that break. I decided I was just going to do nothing and see what comes out of that. And this podcast ultimately is what came out of it. Not because I said I want to do a podcast, but because I said I want to just write songs. So again, it was me in my room writing. And, a few friends asked to hear and I shared with them and they pushed me to think about what else I could do with it. And it resulted in this podcast. I've told this story a bunch of times in the podcast, so I'm not going into all the details, though some of the players. Where I am now that I've been writing these songs since the beginning of the pandemic. I've been writing a lot more songs other than the Tehillim songs, even in this 3-year window, but I go to this thing called Song School every summer. The instructors, the staff, the participants, everyone keeps coming back to saying the same thing. There's only one you. Your you is going to say something in song, in poetry, in art, in conversation that is going to have an impact on someone if you let it. And the penny really dropped for me this summer. I have always played in bands, right? So yes, I've been in my room, but when I kind of did any kind of public musical thing, it was with another guitar player at a minimum, and usually a bass player and drummer as well, sometimes a keyboardist, sometimes other instruments. And even if I sang, I wasn't the sole singer for the very reasons you're articulating. Like in rehearsal, I had no problem both saying, what do you think? And also saying, I really want to do it this way. Some of the bands were clear hierarchies, and I was not always the decision maker because it was really somebody else's band. Like you kind of know what it is. When there were multiple leaders, it was always very healthy in that way. And, you know, I've evolved in how I do that, but it was always with a group of people. So even if I was stepping out and playing lead, or if I was stepping out and singing lead vocals, I had a whole team with me, and it wasn't about me. It was about the band. Yes, I could kind of grind myself to dust after a performance if I felt like I didn't do well enough, because at bottom, I think the concern you're articulating is about the need for perfection, whether it's perfection as a value of its own or the need to be seen as someone who is, you know, perfect, stellar, blah, blah, blah. I think that I've struggled with that for a long, long time. For me, the change began, and you will hear just how slow going the change has been. The change began in 2010 at Song School, where I took a class. I took two different classes, one with Paul Reisler and one with Timmy Reardon. And I continued studying with Paul for several years, but Timmy's language really stuck with me. And he's created this online community called Fearless Songwriting. The basic philosophy is write a song a day in as much time as you have, and try to make sure that it's not more than 45 minutes because you have other things to do. For me, at first, the exercise was, well, shit, I'm never going to be able to do that. I polish the stone continually. And I recognized that while I was not focused on perfection, I was focused on finishing. Right? So the finishing became that which needed to be perfect. If I didn't finish, I failed. So I started doing that in 2010 on and off. And because I was concerned, you know, busy life, kids, et cetera, that I could not do 7 songs in 7 days, because that's the Fearless Songwriter Challenge. 7 songs in 7 days, 6 times a year. Post whatever you have on Facebook. I've evolved into finishing in a time frame and recognizing that if 6 months from now, and this was Timmy's wisdom and Paul Reisler's wisdom, if 6 months from now I come back to the song and I think there's something there, I can perfect it. Recognizing, of course, songs are never perfect, but sometimes they're finished. And sometimes they may be finished for now. And you come back to it 20 years later and say, well, I think I can do better than that. And you may choose to. I mean, there are songwriters who say once it's finished, you move on. And, you know, that's a whole other conversation. But anyway, at bottom, it's about kind of getting past your own gremlins and saying, you know what, today all I could do is come up with a chorus. And it's only 2 words. Or, you know what? Okay, here are the 3 words that just came to me. Fuck this shit. That's my chorus. And that's what you post today. And if that's what you post today, that's perfect. You can come back to it if you want. So the perfection isn't in what you do, it's in that you do, which is contrary to the message of the song in some respects. Mm-hmm. In some respects. I mean, we can kind of debate that if you want. Any thoughts about any of that?
The thing that struck me at the end is I think that there is for me, I have such a drive to be perfect. I mean, no one can be perfect. Like none of us are ever going to be the finished product. Like we're never going to be perfect. But I wonder if, like, one of the things I've been trying to embrace is doing more things that get a crap out of me, or being more playful with the things that I used to take really seriously. And there was something you said just now that just struck me in terms of what if we could understand perfection is just showing up. You know, like, yeah, that's all it needs to be. Showing up, that is the perfection. The task itself, well, there's no way that the task or the goal or whatever the thing is, there's no way that it can be perfect. It just by definition, it can never reach that. But like showing up can be perfect is enough. Perfection implies that there is a finite point that you reach. The same with being enough. So it's just, what would it look like if we were able to say, actually, it's not about doing the thing perfectly, but that's perfect. I showed up.
It goes back to the Tehillim. God stands in the divine assembly. What you just said is, it is enough to be there. You're among the assembly. And then among the divine beings, God pronounces judgment. That's what I think you and I have been bumping up against. Again, I used to go to clubs. You said this before. I used to go to clubs. I'd watch the band and say, I can play better than him. I can sing better than she can. Or I would say, oh, they're not particularly good songwriters. Really, it's about your self-criticism. It's not about them as much as it is about you. You want, or me, not you, me, about me wanting something in that moment. When, on the contrary, the learning there is they're doing it. And so in that sense, it is about what you do, that you're doing it. The pre-chorus, when you've done all that you can and think, now it's not up to man, but up to Hercules and Xena, there's an acknowledgement in that moment that there's something greater than ourselves, okay? Our song includes Hercules and Xena because the prompt had a gravestone for Hercules, right? So that's right there when you've done all that you can. But even when you recognize that there's something greater than yourself, I think that, and this is where the song actually aligns with your idea, just do it. Get back in the arena.
I wonder, as you're saying it, that there is a role for both sides. There is the time to be in the arena and there is the time to be the observer, the audience member. And I think that, we've been talking about a lot about what it means to show up to be in the arena. So, for example, a couple of weeks ago, Kevin and I went to this open mic comedy evening just around the corner from here. It's been going for ages. We've lived in this area for years. It's the first time we've actually made it. And these are just regular people who are trying out a bit of stand-up comedy. Some of them were really, really funny. Some of them were really, really not. So one thing, we were not going to criticize them because they were the ones that were standing there in that arena and they were doing it, and they were doing something that none of us that were in the audience were doing. And so that was something where you're just like, you know what, regardless of how good or not I may consider this person to be, because it's entirely subjective, they're doing it. And that was really, really incredible. So that's the role of the person who gets into the arena. But I think that we can't be the bystanders when we're just in the audience. We have a role, which is, how am I going to show up as the audience member, as the witness? How I still have a role. I can control how I choose to show up. I can choose to show up and be gracious and in awe of the person that's doing their thing, or I can sit there and have that, you know what, they're not great. I could do better than that. I couldn't. Simple fact. Not happened. But it's all about how we show up. The arena is in places.
I think you're exactly right there. In both cases, you're showing up in the arena. In one case, it's to be the combatant/performer. Center of attention is on you, the person who's running a meeting, whatever it is. In another case, you're the consumer. And I agree with you that whoever is performing and presenting, who took on this role, is someone who they get a presumption of awesomeness simply because they're choosing to step into that role. But I also think that whether it's about running a meeting, putting together a PowerPoint presentation, performing a song, being on a podcast, you have to show up prepared. You have to show up prepared to entertain your audience, including if it's a, mind-numbingly number crunch focused presentation about a budget. You have to assume your audience is there for you, and simultaneously you have to assume that you have to keep them there for you, that at any moment, they are entitled to use the law of mobility and physically or mentally step out of the room. To me, that's where the magic happens. If you trust your performer, you choose to go in and not be cynical like I was as a Ute, to quote Joe Pesci in whatever movie that was. Or today, I go in and I start with the assumption that whoever it is going to just capture my attention. If they don't, then I no longer go to that place, oh, they're awful, or, I can do better, or whatever it was that I did as a Ute. Instead, I just say, okay, I'm not their audience. Now, I won't be rude and pull out my cell phone, but being someone who was diagnosed with ADD at a very young age, I have excellent distraction skills and can distract myself.
So I think that when I first was thinking about this, I saw, almost like two individuals, the person in the arena and the person who is in the stands. But actually, that's pretty much never the case. You're never going to really have an arena where there is one person sitting in the stands. So we at all points need to see ourselves as being in that arena, in that the way in which we respond impacts how other people respond. And we see that again using the examples of comedy nights or concerts, that when some people start to either laugh out loud at the material or start singing along with songs or dancing or engaging, that becomes infectious. So the person that can be that trigger, because they're going to say, you know what, I'm here. I am really enjoying and appreciating that person there on that stage. At that moment, the way in which you choose to act potentially puts you on a stage as well for the other people around you. And we're like,
for sure,
this is how I might choose to respond because I can see someone else having fun. Therefore, I'm going to do it. Or I can see all these other people sitting there with their folded, looking deeply disappointed, getting their phones out. We've all been in those meetings where there is someone who is in a position of authority who gets their phone out halfway through the meeting or starts looking really distracted. And that shifts the dynamic for the rest of the room. And everyone else is like, well, that person doesn't need to pay attention. I don't need to pay attention. So it's just that sense that we are all at any given moment in time. Like, how does it change how we act?
Yeah.
Consider ourselves to be not the center of attention, but somebody who is also in an arena of some kind.
The specific example you identified, really, it brings me back to, not by accident that the psalmists elsewhere said, Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha, serve God, that which is greater than ourselves, with joy. It's also not an accident that we are told that we have an obligation to be misameach chasan v'kala, to bring joy to the bride and groom. And the common features of those two are not only joy, but the common feature is in order to fulfill the obligation, you must make a choice. So in the bride and groom scenario, you have to say, oh my God, nobody's dancing. It's a wedding. They're going to be happy if I dance. And so in that moment, you have that discomfort. You may be the only one dancing, but at least the chassan and kala, the bride and groom, know you've tried. Now, no one's ever going to unless you're like in a group of the coldest people on earth, no one's ever going to let you dance alone at a wedding. They might let you dance alone at a club.
Yes.
Because that is socially acceptable, right? That's okay. It kind of depends who's there. And if you're there alone or if you're there with friends, because if you're there with friends or family, they're probably not going to let you alone. But if it's stranger, are you going to catch someone's eye in a way that they're going to look at you and say, he's not a weirdo, he's not a creep, I can be silly with him? And it's all about those interactions. And again, that's about when you've done all that you can. The audience creates a role in the performer's experience, which creates a role in the audience's experience. And it's a powerful loop.
There's no arena without an audience. There's no stage without an audience. There's no presentation without an audience. The two sides of that, it's a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah.
We think that the person standing in front of us or performing, whatever that role might be, is there doing a service for us. They're providing some kind of entertainment, information sharing, whatever that thing is. But the truth is that we also have that role to play in service to the person who is brave enough to have stepped into that space.
That's what I love about Limud, right? That's also what I love about Pardes and what I love about Hadar. All three of these are different Jewish learning organizations. They all have a common set of values, which is every person can own their experience. Now, they all approach this differently, but okay, I'm going to tell this story. So when Shari and I got married, so I had this kind of deep modern Orthodox pan-Hasidic background, to the point where like I wasn't aware that the world wasn't Jewish until a little bit later in life when I started going to my dad's store and encountering people of other faiths, people of other ethnicities and other religions, because they worked with him, they were customers, etc., etc. Shari, by contrast, grew up in the world. There were Irish people around her and Italian people around her in Malden, Massachusetts. So when we got together, we had to find a place. We had to first have a conversation about whether we wanted to be going to synagogue together, have an affiliation. And if we did, what were we going to do? And Shari, we got into a whole argument about whether to go to a conservative synagogue because I mistakenly used the words that it had an Orthodox nusach, set of melodies. And Shari heard Orthodox and just shut down because she was at the time offended by the mechitza, the kind of divider between men and women. And we came out of the fight by coming to an agreement that over the high holidays, we would go to my parents and the Young Israel of Far Rockaway for one of them and the synagogue where she'd been taking kind of like intro to Judaism classes. She used to call it her How to Be a Jew class, even though she's born Jewish, but she just had very little background in it. And that we'd go to her synagogue for Yom Kippur. And, we left the Young Israel of Far Rockaway and she said to me, why exactly is that moving to you? And, I couldn't find the words in that moment, but I probably said something like, this is what I grew up with. I know it. I know what the prayers mean. So I find it meaningful. And by this time already, I had become a feminist. Thank you, Professor Kathy Abrams at BU Law, who taught a seminar on feminism and gender discrimination for one semester. I also acknowledge that there's a difference because, I'm in it. Young Israel Far Rockaway is 2 levels. There are a few women who sit in the back on the first row behind a very tall mechitza where you can't really see in, but they can kind of pull the curtain aside and see out. And the rest of the women sat upstairs. So there's a big difference. And I understand why, that would contribute to you feeling alienated. And we just kind of left it there. We then went to her synagogue. We were there for Yom Kippur for Kol Nidre. And she turns to me afterwards and she said, wasn't that beautiful? And I took a breath. I thought about it. I said, absolutely. That was a beautiful experience. And she's like, what do you mean? And I was like, I know you, Shari, you're not going to want to have this conversation now. Your head is in your laning. She had her adult bat mitzvah and she was going to read from the Torah the next morning. I said, let's talk about this after you lane. She said, okay. She comes to sit down. Congratulations. She has all the adrenaline. 3 minutes go by, 5 minutes, no more than 7. She turns to me and said, okay, what did you mean last night? And I explained that it is beautiful, but so is, I'm dating the time period here. So was Cats. So was Les Mis. These are things that are all beautiful, but I am a consumer of the experience. It's like somebody else is doing and I'm consuming. It's very much the arena analogy we were talking about before. I said, what I love about the Young Israel of Far Rockaway and many other shuls, but specifically, you typically think about this in the kind of Orthodox and modern Orthodox arena where you don't have a cantor. It's just local lay leaders who lead the services. Yes, they need to sing well. Yes, they need to pick tunes that people can sing along to if it's a singing synagogue. Yes, they need to be loud and clear, and they need to have some presence, whether they're criers or shriers, screamers, right? But at the end of the day, their job is to tell me when to start and stop particular sections so that I can encounter the divine in whatever way I'm going to. Whether it's me in the tefillah, the prayer, whether it's me and God and I'm ignoring the prayer, whether it's me singing along with my Uncle Normie and Anchi and Erwin and my dad, because that was that which is greater than myself. What moves me is that it makes me an owner, a stakeholder in the experience with the community, with the divine. And Shari's like, she's taking it in. Thinking, like 15 minutes maybe goes by and she turns to me and like with real heat in her face, she says, I hate you. Like, what do you mean? Why? Like, we're not engaged at this point, but we kind of knew that we were going to get married. Yeah. She said, you ruined this experience for me. Let's go. Oh, wow. And luckily we were on the UCLA campus, so we had like 5 other things to choose. So we got to experience Zalman Schachter Shalomi, and that was super cool because I knew who he was. I had read, what's the name of that book? Yitz Greenberg, Zalman Schachter Shalomi, The Jew and the Lotus.
Oh, yes. Oh, that's
It's a great book. I love all the interconnections between Judaism and Buddhism and, the acknowledgement of differences. It was a beautiful book. I'd read it, so I knew who he was. I didn't know he was going to be there because the descriptions were very vague that we had on our whatever piece of paper we had. It was traditional minyan. It was liberal minyan. And it doesn't say who's there. We went to 3 different places after that. And the only minyan that we hadn't tried was the traditional one. Or maybe there was one that I was just not interested in going to. Probably the yoga minyan because I wasn't into yoga back then. So we walk in and, we have to go in and go upstairs. And, there's a flight or 2, but you could hear the music. I'm like, oh, this is a nusach I'm familiar because it wasn't the congregation singing. It was whoever was leading the prayer. I said, oh, this is a nusach I'm used to. I wonder if Shari's going to like this. I bet it's a Orthodox minyan with a mechitza. And we walk in. We're coming close, and I'm like, wait, that's a boy singing. That's weird. I guess college, they're going to have young people with high voices, maybe. Because at this point in my Jewish journey, the idea of a woman leading was just not something I was familiar with. But I walk in and I see that it's a woman with beautiful long hair, and it's very clear that she's a woman. I'm like, oh, Shari's going to be very happy here. This may take a minute for me to get used to. And then I saw her counterpart, and I think it was Judy Aronoff. Probably. It was Judy Aronoff, and her counterpart was Chaim Seidler-Feller. And I've known Chaim since I was a kid. He was at my bar mitzvah. His parents and my Aunt Esther and Uncle Nat, may they all rest in peace, were best friends. So they were at every family simcha. So I've known him forever. I was like, okay, I'm going to be comfortable here too. And thus began kind of our journey of exploring. All of that came about because of a willingness to explore greater levels of ownership with disparate knowledge and experience. And that's been kind of like the hallmark of our marriage, which is why we've been more observant, less observant, even less observant, more observant, and where we are now, whatever that is.
I love that. I also love that we just completely glossed over that at the beginning of the story that Shari was doing her adult bat mitzvah, was laning, all of these phenomenal things, which is really about stepping up and up and into that arena, which may not have been an arena that was available at certain points.
Right.
So we glossed over some phenomenal achievements there, which are just knowing Shari, that's not a surprise in any way whatsoever. And that's why she is so phenomenal. I love that story. And I just think that what happens when we put aside, firstly, we think that we talk with shared language. We think that we have the shared language, and so many times it's not. And we find ourselves talking from these different vantage points, not understanding why the other person can't understand, because we think it's entirely clear what I'm saying. Why are you not getting it? And it's because there are these different perspectives that we don't always have that room to hold and play with and engage with. And I really love that there was no fixed destination to what it meant in the end for your shared Judaism. And going into it, there was a fixed, I have a destination.
Yeah.
How are they not the same destinations? But then there was the space to actually, we keep using the arena metaphor a lot, and for good reason. You can use the arena to be a gladiatorial experience where we're going to be coming at each other. One of us has to win. That is the only way that someone leaves this arena. There has to be a winner, and therefore there has to be a loser and a casualty in this. Someone has to give up something fundamental to them. Or that arena becomes something which is a shared space for exploration and learning and knowing when to step forward, when to step back, when to do that together, when to give the other the space to do that. And as you were talking, there was this commercial that sprung to mind. I can't remember who it's for. I think it was for one of the internet providers at the time, where there was a regular person standing in the middle of this giant arena on their own, calling out questions. And there are people, the way that it's filmed, this arena is like kind of extending to the gods. It is just beyond imagination. And then someone will stand up in the arena and they will answer that question for the person that's standing there in the middle. And it completely turns that concept of focal point is on its head. And it's just kind of, well, where does the learning take place? When can we be open to the, I have a question or I have a thought and it's not necessarily fully fledged. Everyone else knows this, but I'm gonna ask this and I'm gonna see where the answer comes from, and just that openness to be in.
This is one among many things I learned from you and others in the Limud context. You had us, if I was arguing red and Shari was arguing purple, you would say, okay, Shep, argue for purple. And Shari, argue for red. And it's such a powerful experience when you take that seriously, because you're literally putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And it had the intended effect, which is the creation of compassion. And that brings me back to something we talked about before. There's ultimately a spectrum in all of this. Yes, give the performer the benefit of the doubt and you start them out as awesome. But if they are awful, because they have not prepared, because they are looking at their shoes rather than the audience, because they're not trying to connect. I'm sorry, it's okay to have a perspective that says, I don't need to kind of continue thinking this person is awesome. Whether you want to go as far as saying, I don't need to respect this person, that's very much a personal choice. That's probably the other end of the spectrum. I would not go as far as saying, I can catcall them. That's too much for me, but for some people that may be okay. My point in the larger conversation is, for many of these things, these are polarities to manage. You talked about leading behind the scenes, and you may not mean either of these, but two things came to mind that way. I run my law firm on Limud principles as much as I can. So it's a very flat organization. It's, what's the phrase? It's a hierarchy of function, not a hierarchy of experience or expertise. Because if it's based on experience, I have more experience than anyone in the firm. Based on years, not necessarily the types of deals we do. But I don't run the firm in a kind of lead from the front way for exactly the reasons that we were talking about. If I'm leading from the front, it's only my firm. And no one becomes a stakeholder except by virtue of their desire, most cynically, to get a good bonus and good salary, and least cynically, to the extent they feel loyal to the clients. And it creates all the wrong incentives. For me, I've worked in those environments and I'm not comfortable in them. And it goes back to, I'd rather be in a band than be a solo performer. But Shari is a leader. She leads from behind the scenes. She's doing accounting, dealing with the state bar, making sure that, our insurance is in order. I have a role in that, but she takes the lead there. I'm focusing on the behind the scenes language. And I want to compare it against language that is sort of amorphous, but is a different model around it. Have you ever read Jim Collins?
Yes.
So he uses the language of level 5 leadership. And basically what he's saying is not lead behind the scenes, not lead from the front, but lead from behind, which, as I understand and recall it, I read it probably 21 years ago, 22 years ago. What a level 5 leader does is give everyone around them the opportunity to succeed. And it goes as far as saying, when a colleague is given a responsibility and I don't give them good instructions or I don't give them a deadline, while it may also be their responsibility ask for clarification and for the deadline, it is ultimately my failure in leading from behind to allow them to shine. When they make a mistake, when there's a problem, don't call up the client and say, well, they did this. Say, I'm so sorry we failed you in this way, right? It's a little bit like copyright law. The two of us can own 100% of a copyright, right? Yes, we can agree to share it 50-50 if we enter into a contract, but if we don't, then the two of us own 100% of it. And I think that running any organization like that, if you create stakeholders, you create more sustainability. If you lead from the front, it's harder to do that. Or it becomes a bit of a cult of personality. And, yes, it can sustain. I mean, let's use Pardes as an example, an institution I love. They've had multiple leaders over the years and they're still doing great. Part of that is because they've chosen great frontal leaders. Part of that is because those leaders have learned how to work in a way where everyone gets a piece of the copyright and feels like they own it. Now that I've laid all of that out, what did you mean when you were talking about behind the scenes leadership?
So actually, as soon as I'd said it, I realized that I don't know if the word leadership is the right word. And I think, honestly, I think the problem is that we overuse the word leadership. We want leadership everywhere. We all want to be a leader of some kind. Are we leading the troops? Are we behind the scenes? And I think that was the thing that I was really wrestling with in terms of leadership roles. And, for, a long time, I was more of a visible leader. Comfortable or uncomfortable with that, that's where I was. And at times, we've talked about this other points, like sometimes you find yourself as a leader thinking you got everybody they're still right behind you, and you step forward and you say the things you need to say, and you're like, right, where are you? How far back? I thought you were right here. Like, I didn't realize. So, but I think in this case, it isn't necessarily leadership that I'm talking about. I think it is okay to be in roles where you are empowering and enabling the leaders. So the way that I like to talk about it is Mr. Rogers, who I just absolutely love and adore the way that he approached pretty much everything that he did. And he had that beautiful quote that in scary, I'm paraphrasing it, and I'm definitely going to butcher it, but in scary times, look for the helpers. They're the ones that are going to make things better for you. And there are really, really, really important roles out there that are the helper roles. And they're not necessarily, more often than not, I would say, they are not the prestigious roles. They are not, they're not necessarily the names that we know. They are the people who are doing.
Yeah.
Not just the people who are saying. And for me, it was about, right, okay, we have all these incredible people out there who are the helpers, the people we need to turn to, the people who will really be there when we need them. But who helps the helpers? Who helps them to be able to do what they do and stay, to be able to look after themselves and to be able to give in a sustainable way without just giving entirely of themselves, which is a problem that we often face in leadership. We give. And then that's it. You burn out. And so I don't think it's necessarily, when I talk about it now, I don't think it's about leading from behind. I think it is about being able to enable the people who are not necessarily the leaders, but the helpers, the ones who are really, really doing the stuff that we need them to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm glad you clarified that. I mean, I think it's related to what I was saying. As a musician, yes, I play guitar. Yes, I sing. I even sing lead. I sing mandolin. But at bottom, emotionally, and, physically, but emotionally more than anything else, I'm a bass player. I play guitar parts that create a foundation from which other musicians can play. The bass player needs to show leadership. When the drummer is rushing ahead or the guitar player is rushing ahead, the bass player needs to hold down that bottom in a way, with words, without words, that says, dude, you're rushing, or you're going too slow, you're too much in the pocket, you're not enough in the pocket. Bass players are only the stars when you're Flea or Paul McCartney. That band had many stars in it. So it's a great example of where leadership undulates from person to person, from moment to moment within a phrase or a bar even. And I think that that's, to me, as someone who coaches people, I understand the eye roll that I heard when you were saying everybody wants everything to be leadership. But as someone who leads a firm, right? It's small, tiny, there are only 10 of us. But I need every single person among those 10 to lead, because if they don't lead, if I'm spending all of my time on the phone saying, did you do this? Did you do that? Why did you do it this way rather than that way? We're never going to get anything done for the clients, and it's just not sustainable. I don't think we're unique. I think that the concept that I'm articulating scales to much larger law firms. And if it applies at a law firm, it certainly freaking applies at a shul, right? It certainly applies at a learning institution. It's even more so applies at an NGO or an organization like IIRR, which, serves developing communities. So I think this is where that language that neither of us remembers the precise structure of hierarchy of function rather than a hierarchy of experience or expertise, whatever it was, that's where it's really important. If you can recognize in a given moment that, what was the word you used? The crap job. Okay, we're just going to go with the crap job language. That the person with the crap job has to do it in a way where they are in the arena and that it is, in fact, about what you do. It doesn't need to be perfect, but it needs to be good enough to pass it along to the next person in the process, whether they're a consumer or another leader who has something else to do with it. That's a model that I would advocate for because it keeps everyone as an open quote owner, close quote, even if it's not technically legally true.
But I would challenge that. I don't hear what you're describing as necessarily being about leadership. I see that as a perfectly balanced ecosystem where every single organism within that ecosystem has a fundamental role. And if that role is not fulfilled, then the ecosystem is out of whack.
Right.
And so it doesn't need to, of course, there is, I'm not saying there's no place for leadership, but I think leadership conjures up certain images and associations that straight away can force some people into the role of saying, but I'm not a leader or I'm not good enough. Who am I to be a leader? And then straight away, there is a hierarchy. But when it's a case of an ecosystem needs everything is crucial. Everyone is crucial within that ecosystem. You don't have the same space to say, who am I? Who am I to?
Right.
Someone else can do that better than me. I'm not the person. And then it's not about leading from the front, from behind, from any other vantage point. There are points at which our unique role, character, expertise, experience, all of those things are called for. And that is a unique called for in that space. Sometimes we don't know when that is. And sometimes I think it's not necessarily about leadership. It's almost, now I'm completely mixing metaphors. Then it becomes an orchestra. Sometimes you need the conductor that's going to be able to say, you know what? We need to hear a little bit more of the piccolo at this point.
Sure.
I just think that for community, for organizations, all of those places with the naming, that if we can shift away from our standard definitions of leadership, which I think exclude people, burn out people, and with the best of intentions, but an ecosystem, a community where everybody has their function. And some people's function might be to help bring out the purpose of somebody else and to nurture them and to help them grow. So many different metaphors going on through this, the gardener. The more I think about it, the more I think it is leadership ends up taking us away from where we actually essence of what we really need.
I just want to kind of name what I think we just did. We had a respectful disagreement for the sake of something greater than ourselves. You pointed out that we may not have shared language on this, right? Because I was using the word leadership in a way that bumped you, right? And ultimately what you're saying is we're going to call it fumfer because leadership as a word has too much weight, too many different meanings, creates too much pressure. So we're going to call it fumfer. It's a bad choice of words because to fumfer means to be uncertain, but I'm uncertain about what the word is. So that's why I chose fumfer. We're going to call it fumfering. And we're all going to do this thing called fumfering in our way, and it's going to be not one size fits all, but one size fits each of us, and we're going to figure out how to fumfer together. And I love that model and that articulation. And it honestly, it really brings me back to, the language of my youth. We want Mashiach now. This is an articulation of the way the world should, the way the world could work if we choose to let it. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And the work you do and the wisdom you dole out whenever we speak always moves me. I can't thank you enough for joining me in this conversation, Shosh.
I know that we're going to have many, many conversations like this. And I love being in a space with you. So thank you for creating this space. I'm taking so much away to think about.
You and me both.
So thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. Special thanks to Shosh for joining me, to Liz Hanlon for co-writing It's About What You Do with me, to Emil Stern for his help in producing this episode, to E. Rose for his help in producing the song in this episode, to Sean Kawanami for his help in producing the song, to Jessica Hanna Sweetler for her help on social media, to Liat Silvera for designing the podcast logo, and to my wife Shari, who gives me the time, space, and support to make the music and this podcast happen. You can find It's About What You Do and all of the other songs in this song cycle on most platforms that stream or download music, including Spotify and Apple. Please support my music and the show by sharing, rating, commenting, and subscribing on your favorite platforms. Next time on The Rest is Commentary, I sit down with my friend and neighbor, Rabbi Aaron Lerner, president and CEO of the Jewish Community Foundation. We get into how Jewish spirituality, songwriting, and community leadership intersect, openness and boundaries in Orthodox life, creativity in religious practice, leadership, philanthropy, and resilience after October 7th, mindfulness, empathy, and conflict resolution, finding blessing and the divine in daily life. We also talk about the upcoming celebration of Rabbi Dov Linzer and Dr. Michelle Friedman at Yeshivat Chovevei Torah in Riverdale on May 5th, 2026. Get your tickets now at yctorah.org. My conversation with Aaron is sparked by his reflections on the song Magnets, Elevators, Ghosts, inspired by Psalm 80 and also from a Shanna in a Dress song sprint. Please join us.